The night was heavy with storm clouds. The private runway glowed faintly under the weak lights, but the sound of thunder in the distance was growing louder. On that runway, the pride of a billionaire stood silent and broken. His jet, a machine worth millions, refused to start. The engines had failed at the worst possible time. His entire team of engineers was already sweating, tools scattered on the ground, but every attempt ended with the same hopeless result: silence from the powerful engines. The billionaire stood tall, dressed in his expensive black suit, his face cold but his eyes filled with fire. Time was not on his side. He had an important meeting in another city, one that could decide the future of his empire. Every second wasted was like money burning away. His security team kept everyone away, their sharp eyes scanning the shadows. No one was allowed near the jet, no one except his chosen staff. But still, the problem refused to be solved. The impossible job was crushing their pride. At the edge of the runway, hidden in the dark, a girl watched. She was thin, her clothes torn, her hands dirty. To anyone else she looked like nothing more than a homeless wanderer searching for scraps. She had been living near the abandoned hangars for weeks, surviving on leftovers and rainwater. Tonight, hunger had pushed her closer to the runway lights, closer than she normally dared. Her eyes, though tired, were sharp. She studied the jet, the way its nose tilted slightly, the faint hiss of a system struggling to breathe. She could see what the experts could not. The billionaire's voice broke through the night. "Why is it taking so long?" he snapped. His engineers bowed their heads, embarrassed. One of them stammered, "Sir, we've checked everything. The systems are locked. Nothing is responding." The billionaire's hand clenched. He was not a man used to hearing the word failure. He was a man who bought solutions, who crushed problems with money. Yet now, all his money was useless. From the shadows, the girl stepped forward. The guards instantly noticed. "Stay back," one of them shouted, raising his arm. But she didn't flinch. Hunger and desperation had given her courage, but something else burned inside her too, a strange confidence. Her voice was low, almost hesitant, yet steady. I can fix it," she said. Every head turned. The engineers frowned in disbelief. The billionaire's eyes narrowed, as if trying to decide whether she was a fool or insane. "What did you say?" he asked, his tone sharp. The girl swallowed, but repeated, "Your jet. I can fix it." A burst of laughter came from one of the mechanics. This is not a toy bicycle, girl. This is a machine you cannot even dream of touching." Another added, "Throw her out before she damages something." The guards moved closer, ready to drag her away. But the billionaire raised his hand, stopping them. Something about the girl's voice had caught his attention. It wasn't arrogance, and it wasn't blind bravery. It was knowledge. She had spoken like someone who understood machines. His sharp eyes studied her face, the dirt, the hunger, but also the strange light in her eyes. The storm rumbled above them, lightning splitting the sky for a second, and in that brief flash of white, the girl looked almost unshaken, as if the chaos around her meant nothing. "How would you fix it?" the billionaire asked, his tone now slower, measured. The girl took a step closer. The guards shifted uneasily, but she ignored them. Her eyes moved to the engine panel, the wires, the faint glow of warning lights. "It's not the fuel. Not the power. It's the heart," she whispered. Her finger pointed toward a section that no one had bothered to check. "The system is choking. You are forcing it, but it needs release." The engineers stared at her in silence. One of them opened his mouth to protest, but stopped. What she said, strangely made sense. Still, none of them were willing to admit it. The billionaire's gaze stayed locked on her. He could feel something unusual, something he hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. Could this broken girl, this stranger from the shadows, really see what his experts could not? His pride wanted to reject the idea, but his instincts whispered another answer. The night grew darker, the wind stronger, and the urgency heavier. The billionaire's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" he demanded. The girl lowered her eyes for a moment, as if the question itself was too heavy. "No one," she said softly. "Just someone who knows machines better than people." Her words carried a weight that silenced the air. Even the storm seemed to pause. The billionaire felt something stir inside him, a mix of suspicion, curiosity, and a strange pull he couldn't explain. At that moment, the impossible job no longer seemed to be about just fixing a jet. It was about something bigger. A choice. A risk. A test of trust. And as the thunder rolled again, the billionaire knew one thing for sure: this night was not going to end the way anyone expected. The guards still stood tense, their hands close to their weapons, ready to throw the girl out into the dark storm. The engineers looked insulted that this stranger even dared to speak about the jet. Yet the girl did not step back. Her thin shoulders were straight, her eyes locked on the silent machine that towered above them all. She did not see wealth, power, or danger. She only saw a broken engine crying out for help. The billionaire's silence made everyone restless. His staff waited for him to laugh, to order the girl thrown far away, but he did not. Instead, he kept watching her with sharp curiosity. Finally, one of the engineers broke the silence. "Sir, you can't be serious. This girl doesn't belong here. She'll only waste our time." The billionaire's gaze shifted to his chief engineer. His voice was cold, but steady. "And what has your time given me so far?" "A jet that still sits broken." The engineer froze, unable to respond. The truth stung worse than any insult. The girl finally spoke again, her voice soft but carrying in the tense night air. "Give me one chance," she said. 10 minutes. If I fail, I'll walk away, and you'll never see me again." Her words seemed impossible, almost foolish. How could someone like her fix what trained experts could not? The security chief shook his head. "Sir, she could damage the systems even more. She doesn't even have clearance to be here." Another added, "For all we know, she could be lying." The voices rose, a wave of protest from every side. But the billionaire raised his hand once again, silencing them. His mind was working faster than theirs. He had lived his whole life reading people, business rivals, politicians, strangers on the street. And this girl, despite her rags, did not sound like a liar. She sounded like someone with nothing left to lose. That, he knew, made her dangerous, but also honest. He stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the runway. His towering figure stopped just a few feet from her. Up close, he could see the dirt on her face, the way her hair clung to her skin from the misty rain. But her eyes were sharp like glass, filled with a fire that no storm could put out. 10 minutes, he repeated slowly, testing the words. "You think that's enough to do what a team of experts couldn't do in an hour?" The girl nodded once. "Yes." The billionaire tilted his head, almost amused, though his face stayed serious. "And if you fail?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then I fail. It wouldn't be the first time life has crushed me." There was no drama in her voice, no begging. Just truth. Something inside the billionaire shifted. He had heard thousands of people beg for money, for jobs, for mercy. But rarely had he heard someone speak with such plain, raw honesty. The engineers still protested. "Sir, this is madness. She has no training." The girl finally turned her eyes toward them, her voice calm but firm. "I had training once. Before my life was torn apart. Before I lost everything." She paused, swallowing the pain that rose in her throat. "Engines don't care if you are rich or poor. They speak one language. I still remember it." Her words froze the group. For a moment, no one spoke. The storm crackled above them, lightning slicing across the black sky, thunder rolling deep and long. The billionaire's decision came quickly. He stepped aside, gesturing to the jet. 10 minutes. Nothing more. If you fail, you leave immediately. If you succeed, he let the words hang in the air, unfinished, heavy with possibility. The girl's chest rose and fell, relief mixing with fear. She nodded once more. Understood. The guards hesitated, then moved aside reluctantly. One of them muttered, "This is a mistake." Another added, "She'll kill herself in there." But the girl ignored them. For the first time in years, she had been given a chance, not pity, not charity, but a chance to prove she still mattered. She walked toward the jet, her bare feet slapping softly against the wet runway. The towering machine loomed above her, metal gleaming faintly under the storm's light. To the billionaire, it looked like a giant swallowing a child. Yet she climbed the small access ladder with steady hands, her thin fingers gripping the cold steel as if it was something she had always known. Inside the engine bay, she crouched low, her hands brushing over the wires, the panels, the heavy metal veins of the beast. She felt the warmth where the system had been forced again and again by the failed attempts of the engineers. She listened to the silence, then pressed her ear against the cold surface, as if the machine could still whisper to her. Outside, the billionaire and his team watched in silence. The storm winds whipped across the runway, carrying the smell of rain and fuel. Every second ticked louder in their heads. Finally, the girl's voice came from inside the jet. "You were forcing it. You were suffocating it." She pulled a wire, twisted a valve, then stopped. Her hands shook slightly. "If I touched the wrong one, the engine could explode," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. But the billionaire heard. His jaw tightened. Every instinct told him this was madness, yet something deep inside refused to stop her. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of a gamble he could not buy his way out of. The girl wiped sweat from her forehead, her face streaked with rain and grease. "Just a little more," she said softly. Her hands moved with the grace of someone who had once belonged in a different world, a world she had lost. The engineers watched in disbelief, some shaking their heads, others unable to look away. Could she really? And then she stopped, her hand resting on the final switch. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Don't fail me now." Outside, the billionaire took a single step closer, his voice low, commanding, but strangely gentle. "Do it." The girl's hand pressed down. The storm roared above them, the runway lights flickered, and a sound unlike any before filled the night. The jet coughed, then growled. The impossible had just begun. The sound was small at first, a cough from deep inside the jet's heart. For a moment, no one believed it. The engineers froze, staring with wide eyes. The guards turned toward each other, uncertain if they had really heard it. But then came the growl, the heavy, living growl of an engine that had refused to answer anyone all night. The billionaire did not move. His eyes were fixed on the girl crouched inside the machine, her hands still pressed against the panel, her body shaking slightly from the effort. The jet was alive again, even if only for a moment. And she had done it. Gasps broke out from the team of experts who had failed him. One whispered, How did she do that?" Another muttered, "It's not possible." They had checked every circuit, every panel, every code. And yet this girl, this stranger from the streets, had touched the right place in seconds. But the girl was not finished. She climbed out slowly, her face wet with rain and streaked with grease. Her chest rose and fell fast, but her eyes glowed with determination. "It's not stable yet," she said. "If you try to fly now, the whole system could shut down midair." The billionaire raised an eyebrow. "Then what are you waiting for?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll need more than 10 minutes. The damage is deeper than anyone saw. The jet is choking from inside. One wrong move, and it won't just fail, it could burn." The engineers shook their heads, their pride still wounded. "She doesn't know what she's saying," one argued. "It's dangerous to let her touch it further." Another added, "If she keeps playing with it, she'll blow the whole thing apart." The girl didn't even look at them. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, her body was weak from hunger and exhaustion. Still, she stood tall, her thin frame silhouetted against the storm. "I know what I'm saying," she whispered. "This isn't guesswork. This is truth. Machines don't lie. People do." The billionaire felt the weight of her words. He had built his empire by separating truth from lies, strength from weakness. And right now, in this storm, the only person who spoke with certainty was the one everyone else wanted to throw away. He took a step closer, ignoring the protests of his staff. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the wind like steel. "Tell me exactly what you need." The girl blinked, surprised. For a moment, she almost couldn't speak. No one had asked her that in years. No one had cared about what she needed, only about what she could survive. She swallowed hard. Tools. Space. And no interruptions. "If anyone distracts me, it could be the end." The billionaire nodded once. "You heard her," he ordered. The guards stepped back. The engineers stared in disbelief, their faces pale with insult and fear. "Sir, you can't seriously," one began, but the billionaire's glare silenced him instantly. His word was final. The girl climbed back into the jet, her small figure disappearing into the giant machine. Inside, the air was hot and thick with fuel and smoke. She pressed her hands against the metal, closing her eyes for a second. She could almost feel its heartbeat, weak and irregular. Memories crashed into her: long nights in a workshop years ago, her father's voice teaching her the language of machines, her laughter when engines roared to life under her hands. That life was gone, stolen by tragedy, but the knowledge was still inside her. Her fingers moved quickly now, twisting wires, loosening bolts, rerouting the breath of the engine. Sparks shot out once, nearly burning her hand, but she didn't stop. "Talk to me," she whispered to the machine. "Show me where it hurts." Outside, the billionaire stood like a statue, watching every flicker of light, every sound. He was not used to trusting anyone, especially not strangers. Yet he found himself holding his breath for her, as if her success meant something far more than just saving his flight. Minutes passed like hours. The storm roared louder, lightning flashing across the sky, but the real storm was inside the jet. One mistake, and the entire craft could burst into flames. The engineers whispered nervously among themselves, ready to run at the first sign of disaster. Then the girl's voice echoed out, calm but sharp. "I'm at the final step. Listen carefully. If I touch this wrong wire, the engine won't just fail. It will explode." Silence fell like a hammer. The guards froze. The engineers looked horrified. Even the billionaire's chest tightened. Every eye was on the small figure inside the jet. The girl wiped the sweat from her forehead, her hands trembling. For the first time, fear flickered across her face, not fear for herself, but fear of failing again, fear of proving everyone right about her worthlessness. She took a deep breath, her voice breaking softly. "Please, don't let me fail again." The billionaire's eyes softened, just for a second. He saw not just a homeless stranger but a fighter standing against the world. His voice, usually cold, carried something unexpected: trust. "You won't fail," he said. "Do it." Her hands steadied. With one sharp movement, she connected the wire. The engine roared. Not a cough, not a growl, this time it screamed with life, louder, stronger, powerful as thunder itself. The entire jet vibrated under the force. Lights flickered on the control panels, systems waking up one by one. The engineers stumbled back, shielding their faces from the sudden blast of sound and light. The guards looked at each other, shocked. The billionaire did not move, but for the first time that night, a small smile touched his lips. The girl crawled out slowly, her body weak, her hands covered in grease, her breath heavy. She looked at the glowing jet behind her and whispered, almost to herself, "It's alive again." For a long moment, no one spoke. The storm raged above, but on the runway, there was only stunned silence. Then the billionaire stepped forward, his voice deep and clear. "Impossible," he said softly, but not in disbelief. "In respect. You did the impossible." The girl looked at him, her eyes shining with tears she tried to hide. She had been invisible to the world for so long. But tonight, for the first time in years, someone had seen her. And the night was far from over. The jet stood alive again, its lights glowing, its engine humming like a beast returned from the dead. The Billionaire's team could not believe what their eyes were seeing. They had sweated, cursed, and failed all night, and yet this thin, homeless girl from the shadows had done in minutes what they could not do at all. But even as the machine breathed again, a heavy silence hung in the air. The engineers exchanged nervous glances, their pride wounded beyond repair. To them, this was an insult and impossible defeat. How could a stranger, someone without money, without status, without training, show them up so easily? The billionaire looked at the girl, his sharp eyes studying her as if she were a puzzle he could not solve. He had met geniuses, prodigies, men and women who ruled industries with their brilliance. But this girl was different. She had no resources, no fame, no power. Yet she carried something that none of his experts did: pure connection to the machine, as if she and the jet shared the same breath. She stood weakly, her legs shaking. Hunger made her pale, exhaustion pressed on her shoulders, but her gaze stayed strong. "It's stable now," she said, her voice low but clear. "But don't push it too hard tonight. Treat it gently, and it will carry you." The billionaire's lips curved, almost into a smile. "Almost. You speak about it like it's alive," he said. The girl nodded once. "Engines are alive. Not like us, but they have rhythm, they have breath. You can't just force them. You must listen to them. Respect them." The engineers scoffed, their anger finally spilling out. "Nonsense," one shouted. "Machines follow rules, nothing more. She just got lucky." Another added bitterly, "Sir, you cannot trust someone like her. She could have destroyed everything." The girl flinched at the words, but did not argue. She had heard worse all her life. Words could not break her anymore. The billionaire turned toward his staff, his voice sharp as a blade. Silence. His authority cut through the night. The men froze. None dared to speak again. His eyes returned to the girl. "Tell me," he asked slowly, "who are you really?" She lowered her eyes, shame pressing on her chest. "No one," she whispered. "Lies," he said firmly. "No one does what you just did. You were trained." "Where?" Her throat tightened. Memories she had buried clawed back into her mind: her father's workshop, the warmth of tools in her hands, the smell of oil and steel. Her father had taught her everything, had told her she had a gift. But then came the accident, the fire, the loss. After that, life had chewed her up and thrown her to the streets. She shook her head, forcing the memories away. "It doesn't matter. That life is gone." The billionaire studied her silently. For a moment, he almost saw the outline of her past in the pain behind her eyes. He didn't press further, but something inside him shifted. He was a man who trusted only results, not words. And she had given him results. The storm above cracked with lightning, casting shadows across the runway. In that light, the billionaire and the girl seemed like two figures from different worlds, one carved from wealth and power, the other from struggle and scars. And yet, somehow, the storm had brought them to the same ground. One of the guards stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, with respect, do you really trust her? She's a stranger. We don't even know her name." The billionaire's eyes narrowed. His voice was calm, but carried weight. "Names don't fix jets. Trust does." The girl looked up sharply at his words. For years, no one had trusted her, no one had believed in her. She had been invisible, a shadow on the streets. But tonight, this man, the richest, coldest man she had ever seen, had placed his empire's pride in her hands. And she had not failed. Her lips trembled, but she held them steady. "Why?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft. "Why trust me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." The billionaire's gaze locked on hers. "Because you were the only one who believed you could do it. And you were right." The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt her throat tighten, her chest ache. All her life, people had told her she was wrong, worthless, broken. Tonight, for the first time, someone had told her she was right. The silence stretched, heavy but not empty. Around them, the storm began to soften, the thunder fading into the distance. The engineers stood back, defeated and bitter. The guards watched cautiously. But in the middle of the runway, two worlds faced each other. The billionaire extended his hand slowly. "You fixed my jet. That makes you more valuable tonight than anyone here." His voice was calm, but his eyes carried respect. "What's your name?" The girl stared at his hand, disbelief flooding her. No one had asked her that in so long that it almost felt like she had forgotten how to answer. She swallowed hard. "Lena," she whispered. "Lena," the billionaire repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "You've earned my trust tonight. Don't lose it." Her heart raced. Trust. The word itself felt like a gift, heavier than money, more powerful than food. She nodded once, her voice shaking but strong. "I won't." The storm clouds parted slightly, a faint moonlight spilling over the runway. And in that pale glow, a strange partnership was born, not between equals, not yet, but between two people who had no reason to trust each other, yet somehow did. The billionaire turned toward his team, his voice commanding. "Prepare for a departure. And remember this night, when all of you failed, a girl from the shadows saved us." The team bowed their heads, their shame silent. Lena stood still, her chest rising and falling, her mind spinning. She had stepped into the light for just one chance, and now she stood in a place she had never dreamed she could belong. The impossible job had been done, but the real story was only beginning. The runway glistened under the thin sheet of rain. The storm was moving away, but the clouds still rumbled like distant drums. The billionaire's jet, once silent and broken, now stood alive, humming with power. Its lights cut through the dark like sharp eyes. The team prepared nervously for departure. The engineers avoided looking at Lena, their pride still wounded. They spoke in hushed tones, but their bitterness showed in every glance. The guards remained tense, unsure of what to think of her. She was still an outsider in their world, still just a girl from the shadows. The billionaire, however, did not take his eyes off her. Lena stood near the edge of the runway, her thin frame trembling from cold and exhaustion. Her hair clung to her face, her clothes were wet and torn, but her presence was impossible to ignore. He had built his empire by trusting results, and she had given him the only result that mattered tonight. "Board the jet," the billionaire ordered his staff. His voice was calm but carried its usual authority. The guards obeyed instantly, moving toward the ramp. The engineers followed slowly, still shaking their heads. But then his gaze shifted back to Lena. She had started to step away, her eyes downcast. She thought her part was over, that her presence was no longer needed. She was used to being dismissed, used to fading back into shadows once her usefulness ended. "Wait," the billionaire said. Lena froze. Slowly, she looked up at him, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "You'll come too," he said simply. Gasps came from his staff. One of the engineers nearly dropped his tool bag. "Sir! With respect, you can't take her on board. She doesn't belong there. She's no one." The billionaire's eyes turned cold. "She's the reason this jet can fly at all. That makes her more valuable than any of you tonight." Lena's chest tightened. She shook her head quickly, her voice weak. "No. I shouldn't. That's not my place." But the billionaire stepped closer, his tall figure casting a shadow over her. His voice lowered, but it carried strength. "You've earned your place. Get on board." For the first time in years, someone was pulling her toward the light instead of pushing her back into the dark. Her legs trembled as she climbed the ramp, her bare feet slipping slightly on the cold metal, but she forced herself forward. Inside the jet, the world felt unreal. Soft leather seats, glowing panels, polished wood, everything screamed wealth and power. Lena felt out of place, like a ghost wandering into another life. She sat quietly in the corner, her hands folded tightly, her body small. The billionaire settled into his seat, glancing once at her before signaling the pilot. "Take us up." The engines roared louder, shaking the cabin. The jet rolled down the runway, faster, faster, the ground blurring beneath it. Lena held her breath, her heart pounding. For a terrifying second, she feared the engine would fail again, that her fix wasn't enough, that she had been wrong after all. But then the wheels lifted. The jet soared upward, cutting through the night sky, leaving the storm behind. The cabin filled with a heavy silence. The staff sat stiffly, pretending not to look at Lena but stealing glances all the same. The pilot's voice came over the speaker. Altitude steady. Systems normal. The billionaire leaned back in his seat, his eyes still on Lena. You see, he said softly, almost to himself. You didn't fail. Lena blinked, her throat tight. She had spent years living with failure, with people telling her she was worthless. Hearing those words, "You didn't fail," felt like fire warming her frozen heart. Tears stung her eyes, but she quickly looked away, ashamed of showing weakness. Yet the billionaire noticed. He said nothing, but a strange respect flickered in his gaze. Minutes passed, the jet slicing smoothly through the clouds. For the first time that night, there was calm. The storm was gone, the impossible had been done, and yet an invisible storm still hung in the air. The engineers whispered among themselves, their anger simmering. One muttered, "She's just lucky." Another hissed back, "He trusts her too much." It's dangerous. They thought Lena could not hear, but she did. She always heard. Still, she kept her head low. She had not come for glory. All she wanted was one chance to be useful, to prove that she still had meaning in a world that had forgotten her. The billionaire finally broke the silence. Tell me, he said, his eyes fixed on her, how did you know what was wrong? My experts checked everything. Lena hesitated. Speaking in this world felt strange. She looked at her hands, still marked with grease. Machines, they talk, she said quietly. Not with words, but with signs. I've been listening to them my whole life. I just never stopped hearing them. The billionaire leaned forward slightly, his interest clear. And where did you learn this? Pain flashed across her face, and she shook her head. Long ago. Before everything was taken from me. He wanted to press further, but something in her voice stopped him. He recognized that tone, the tone of scars too deep to touch. So he leaned back, respecting her silence. The jet continued its steady climb, the world of clouds and stars stretching out around them. For the others, this was just another flight. For Lena, it was everything. She had gone from the streets to the sky in one night. She sat quietly, her heart racing, knowing that when the jet landed, her life might never be the same again. The billionaire closed his eyes for a moment, but his mind was far from rest. He had seen something tonight he could not ignore. A girl with nothing had saved everything. And that truth would follow him long after the storm was gone. The jet landed hours later in a city that never truly slept. Lights glittered across the skyline, tall towers rising into the night. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the fresh scent of a storm past. The billionaire's staff rushed out as soon as the engine shut down. Guards stood ready, engineers carried their cases, pilots gave reports. But the billionaire moved slower, his eyes once again finding Lena. She had not slept during the flight. She had sat still, almost afraid to close her eyes, afraid that when she opened them, it would all vanish like a dream. Her bare feet touched the cold floor of the jet as she hesitated near the door. The rich world outside looked even more impossible than the jet itself. She whispered, "I should go now." The billionaire turned to her, his expression unreadable. Go? And disappear back into shadows? Is that all you want? Her lips trembled. That's all I know. For a long moment, no one spoke. The engineers smirked quietly, satisfied that she would leave. The guards remained silent, unsure of what their employer would decide. Then the billionaire stepped closer. His voice was low but carried a weight that silenced every whisper. You gave me back my wings tonight. Without you, I would have lost everything. You think I will let the world forget you after that? Lena shook her head quickly, fear in her eyes. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere. The billionaire studied her face, the lines of hunger, the scars of struggle, the years of being unseen. He had dealt with leaders, kings, rivals, but rarely had he seen such raw strength hidden in brokenness. You belong where people see your worth, he said. And tonight, I see it clearly. The staff shifted uncomfortably. One engineer spoke up, his voice sharp. Sir, with respect, she is a risk. She's untrained, she's just a street girl. People will laugh if they hear you put trust in her. The billionaire's gaze turned cold. Then let them laugh. They laughed at me when I started with nothing. They always laugh before they bow. Silence fell again. The engineers lowered their eyes, knowing better than to push further. Lena's heart pounded. She wanted to believe his words, but fear held her back. Her whole life had taught her that people used her, then threw her away. Why would this be any different? The billionaire extended his hand toward her. His voice softened. You don't have to go back to the streets. Stay. Work with me. Learn. Build. The choice is yours. Her breath caught. His hand waited in the air between them, steady, patient. Slowly, her own hand rose, hesitant, trembling. When her fingers finally touched his, warmth spread through her chest like light breaking into a dark room. At that moment, she realized something she had forgotten long ago: hope still existed. The days that followed changed everything. News spread quickly in whispers. People wondered who the girl was, the stranger who had done what the billionaire's own experts could not. She walked now not in shadows, but in halls of glass and steel. She was still quiet, still unsure, but the billionaire gave her space to grow. He placed her in workshops, gave her books, gave her tools. And when people questioned, he stood by her. Some mocked her. Some envied her. But slowly, some began to respect her. Not because of her past, but because of what she carried in her hands, the gift of listening to machines, the gift that had saved them all. Lena worked harder than anyone else. She stayed late, studied until her eyes burned, fixed what others ignored. Every bolt she turned, every circuit she touched, reminded her that she was no longer invisible. And yet, she never forgot where she came from. When food was placed before her, she always saved half, remembering nights when she had none. When she passed homeless children on the streets, she knelt to share her bread, her eyes soft with understanding. The billionaire noticed all of it. He saw her strength, her kindness, her fire. And deep inside, he knew the truth: the girl who had once been nothing was becoming something more powerful than any wealth he owned. One evening, as the sun set over the city, the billionaire stood with Lena on a rooftop high above the streets. The jet she had saved was parked nearby, its silver wings glowing in the last light. You've changed everything, he said quietly. Lena looked at him, startled. Me? Yes. You reminded me what matters most. Not power. Not money. But people. People who refuse to give up, even when the world pushes them down. He paused, his eyes steady. You're not the girl in shadows anymore. You're the hero of this story. Tears filled Lena's eyes, but this time she didn't hide them. She let them fall, her voice breaking. No one has ever called me that before. Then let this be the first of many times, the billionaire said. The city lights flickered alive below them, stars shone above, and the jet stood waiting, no longer broken, no longer silent. Lena had stepped out of the shadows, and for the first time, she walked toward a future filled with light. From homeless to hero.